Hi guys, FrostFangs here, back with another Paladins video on a PTS update. Right now it doesn't really look like it because the menus are the same, but this is the mid-emergence PTS with a ton of balance changes in it. I'm going to go through most of them here with you, some that I agree with and some that I really don't. I'm going to keep this kind of condensed, or at least I'm going to try to. If you want to see the super specifics like the tiny bug fixes and stuff, of course check out the patch notes for yourself, but I'm going to cover all the big things here. And like I said, there's a few really good ones and a few that make no sense to me. So first off, we have Azan getting the lockout time of his ultimate reduced a bit, 1.6 to 1.3, pretty subtle, but I do feel a little bit of a difference. I don't think that would really change very much in a game, but yeah, shouldn't feel as sort of stunned when you're landing from it. Then we have Buck getting an extra bit of ammo from 5 to 6, which I think is a nice improvement. 6 I think is the perfect place for it to be. It was 4 I think at one point, and they put it to 5. Now it's up to 6. Cassie on the other hand is maybe a little bit too much. She's getting just a straight attack speed increase, as you can sort of see here. It's going from 0.75 to 0.65. Those are the right numbers, I just checked. But then on top of that, when you pop the ultimate now, you will also get a 20% fire rate increase. So if I pop it here, you'll sort of see that fire rate is a little bit crazy on Cassie, maybe a little bit too much. I don't know if this will make it through because I think it might be a little bit too good, both of those buffs sort of together. Then they've also buffed her disengage a bit, 1 second off the cooldown, 100 extra damage. I like the idea of the disengage being a bit better. I feel like the ultimate buff is also great, so it's not just a team reveal and it's also giving you a bit of a buff, but you combo that with the normal attack speed buff she's getting just flat in this sort of patch, and it's way too much in my opinion. Is going to make her just too strong, because yeah, as you're sort of seeing here, both of them is just a little bit too much, and I feel like Cassie is just going to go into hyperdrive a bit. And even though they mentioned in the patch notes her win rate is a little bit low, this is probably going to make it too much, and probably won't even help that much in the lower ranked stuff, because the win rate I think there comes from just people missing the shots. Other than that, we've got Caspian next, who is another massive change in this update that I don't agree with. Cassie's one is like a subtle disagree. Caspian's is, yeah, I don't like this at all. So there's 3 sort of sections to his nerfs here. First off, a bunch of the cards that were triggering on shields and non-champion stuff like, you know, deployables, etc. is no longer going to trigger on those things. That I can sort of understand, just so that he's more consistent with the rest of the Paladins roster, because this sort of stuff is hit or miss. Some characters trigger on things, others don't, and they seem to be removing it more than they're adding it. So Caspian not having those triggers I think is fine, but they're also completely nerfing measured cadence so that it won't trigger any of his cards. And this is one that is really just confusing to me, because as I talked about a ton in the last Caspian video, or the one before that, whichever one I talked about him being sort of a failed character, this sort of build was kind of the only way to play him. Measured cadence and then a loadout that I don't have here because it's PTS was like the only successful way to sort of do well with Caspian. Not only are they nerfing the cards so they don't trigger on stuff other than champions, but the actual talent just won't work that way anymore. So the main way to play Caspian is now just sort of dead, and he doesn't have any viable options instead of just the one super specific within the super specific, because of the way the cards and the talent worked, is just gone, and now Caspian is left with nothing really viable. If you want to hear me talk about this sort of subject more, definitely check out the last video I made on Caspian, because this will sort of leave him dead in the water until they maybe do something with him in the future, if this does go through. But wait, it's not over. You also now will not be able to trigger your actual stacks on anything other than champions. So deployables, shields, etc. will no longer even give you stacks, let alone not also trigger cards. And this one I also kind of understand, you know, if they want to make his stuff only trigger on characters, but you know, Vora can still get stacks off of shields and deployables, and I don't know why Caspian specifically would not be able to do that. I feel like it's one of those things they either need to remove it from everybody so that it's sort of, you know, applicable to everyone with the cards and the stacks generation and stuff, or it needs to just be left as it was. Because again, if this does go through, it's going to feel really bad to play Caspian. Let alone the fact they also sort of shadow nerfed him. I don't know if I talked about this already. I think I just forgot to mention it, but yeah, find your things now only lasts a second instead of 3. I don't know if they mentioned this anywhere, but I noticed this like a couple days ago. This card is just nerfed. But wait, we're not even done here. I'm not that massive of a Caspian fan, but they are nerfing him so much in this update. They're reducing the attack speed you get from your stacks. It was 5% stack before, 25% max per each of your weapons, down to 2% per stack, so 10%, 15% off of your attack speed, essentially. Although they are buffing his attack speed a bit on both of his weapons to sort of compensate for this, it just doesn't really make sense, especially with the rest of the changes, because it's going to be so much more difficult to generate your stacks, and the stacks are also going to be less important. It's just so much stuff. Anyway, moving on, we got Genos up next. He's getting a really big set of buffs to his right-click duration up by 2 seconds, cooldown down by 1, and initial heal up by 120 from 330 to 450. So yeah, pretty much just implementing the cards into his kit, and the cards are still the same. So his healing effectiveness is going to be massively up. He's still going to struggle with single target heals, but over the course of a game, that is going to make a huge difference. You're essentially getting a 3 seconds difference on your right click, and the cards are still going to buff it the same way. So yeah, Genos is massively up, and they also reduce the cooldown on his F which I don't really like because it will now be a lot less punishing if you get out of your F early to throw a heal or something, because you can just go straight back into it. It'll probably make him feel better, but it will give him maybe a little bit too much of an easy escape. And the people who are really good with Genos, I imagine, are going to make this really, really annoying, because it's already kind of annoying, and it's going to get its cooldown pretty much halved. Genos, I think, is going to move up quite a few tiers, at least in my opinion. I could be wrong with that, though. Then we have Kasumi. Don't worry, I'm going to make a full video on her at some point about the new sort of way she works at the moment, because it is very jank. But specifically in this sort of mid-emergence balance update, she's getting Empowered Curse, shifted from attack speed and movement speed to ultimate charge and movement speed, which is not necessarily worse, just kind of different. Like I said, going to make a full video on her, but her base hits feel sort of horrible, and overall just sort of bad spammy is the way I would describe it. Let's move on to the next character, Khan, who's actually getting good changes. Getting his battle shout, 2 seconds off the cooldown on it, and also 250 extra on the heal, so it's 1350 now, and also an extra pretty hefty amount of damage, 20 extra per shot. So without the taunt, just to show you here, it will deal 210 instead of the 190. So now he'll actually have a pretty hefty amount of, damage output, because he did feel a little bit lacking compared to some of the other tanks, which is something I talked about as well. The Q will feel quite a bit better, especially if you're going for like a setup focused around it. I feel like overall this is a nice buff to Khan. I'm happy with this one. Also, just in case you're wondering why I maybe have stronger views in this video than usual on these balance changes, it's because I am sort of covering them late, and I gave myself a little bit of time to really think if I wanted to make a video on them, if I had enough to say, and then I realized, yeah, I have quite strong opinions on these. Moving on to Lilith, we have her Blood Cannon getting nerfed from 250 to 200, so overall 250 less health. I'm fine with that. I feel like this card was just a bit of a weird power balance on it, and this makes it a little bit less of just straight worth grabbing nearly all the time. Then her ultimate Blood Moon is getting nerfed a bit on the regen from 525 to 475, which I'm also kind of fine with because the regen on it was maybe a little bit too strong with the duration as long as it is. So yeah, now it's down 50 a second. I do also want to mention that they say here they have changes planned for Nyx in this update, but they had issues with her, so she's disabled on the PTS and they haven't posted them here either. So keep an eye out on socials and I'll mention it in a video if they talk about what they're going to change with her, because yeah, glad they're actually including her in this update and not waiting until the next one. Then moving on to 7, he's getting a pretty hefty selection of nerfs here. This one was kind of predictable because people were finally catching on to how goddamn strong he was. His mines are getting the range reduced on them from 35 to 30, pretty subtle. The damage is also going down from 250 to 200. Half a second is being taken off of these two, which is fair. They started at 1 for whatever reason before, and they ticked up half a second each level. They still tick up the same, but now they start at 0.5, which I think is honestly quite fair. So if you go for the combo F, and then you Q, and then you F again, it's still sort of bugged, it seems, at least here, but if you go for full Chronos here, I imagine that this is still going to feel pretty smooth because the difference is pretty minimal, but they've sort of nerfed it in a bunch of different places a tiny bit to make it feel not as bad, because it definitely was, like I said, a little bit too good. Forgot to mention Spring Loaded also being nerfed 5%, but I prefer this sort of way of them nerfing stuff instead of what they did with Caspian. Then he's also getting the range reduced a bit on his auto and burst mode, which I think is perfectly fair. Honestly, I'm happy with all these changes to 7. I feel like he's going to work the same way, just slightly less effectively, and make him a little bit more balanced. Then we're getting some great and really interesting changes for Skye. 2 charges on her smoke, which will actually stay out. This is in her base kit as well. They have put the cooldown up to 14. I don't know how the cooldowns work on it. They seem to actually gem one after the other. Should make her feel quite a bit better regardless of how you play it. It's a change I think I've seen people recommend for a long time, Skye having more than just 1 charge, and I'm glad they've actually put it in. And aside from that, they've also changed the way stealth and prep as a talent works, and this is another change I like quite a bit. You now have 30% bonus speed in stealth, just as a passive, like attached to your wrist bow. It doesn't really matter what it's attached to, but Skye as a passive is 30% faster invised. And then they've changed preparation. The talent, instead of giving you speed or whatever it did before, it now fully regens your wrist ammo, which is kind of weird because you have so many cards in your loadout to buff it, and most people don't do that even. And now they've put ammo gen on a talent, which I didn't think was really a problem Skye had, because you can buy Death Hands, you can buff it out in the loadouts, but yeah, now prep will be a talent that you can grab if you want ammo gen on your F. In my opinion, the way it is at the moment is just a little bit strange. I like what they're trying to do with an F talent, Q talent, right click talent, but prep is just not it in its current form. Finally, getting to the end here, this has taken me quite a while. Hopefully I was able to cut it up so it was somewhat reasonable, because I've been recording here for about an hour. But Charlene, he's getting a 150 health buff and also draw time reduced by 0.1. Really, really happy with these changes. 2.1 health might be better than 2.15. You know, maybe this will be too much, and maybe with a draw time it'll be a bit too strong, but yeah, buffs to Charlene. This does actually feel significantly faster. I guess it is like a 10% buff, right? Yeah, I'm happy with this because Charlene, I think, has just completely fallen off the map for most people, and this should bring him back a bit. I imagine if you combo this with the recurve talent, it should feel really quick. Yeah, that is pretty fast, especially over a game that's going to be pretty good output if you're landing most of these shots. This does feel faster. Then they're nerfing Torvald a bit. This is another change that I like quite a lot. This is a very strange update for me where it's got a lot of stuff I really agree with and I think is pretty much exactly what I would do and then a bunch of changes that make no sense to me that I don't really agree with. But Torvald is going down to 2.5 and 2.75 for the recharge, straight in the middle from where he was before, and then the buff to him, and then the recharge being 10% over the full amount. I like a lot. 2.75 feels much better. I didn't like it being directly the number, because if you got hit like a tiny bit, it wouldn't be full. It was really not satisfying to play. It's a really subtle thing, but it being 10% over like it was originally, I like. And then finally, Willow getting a buff, but it's honestly more of a fix to her ultimate, because your ultimate gives you infinite ammo, and now, if you ult, you will fully gen your mag, so you don't have that weird thing where you're reloading after you F and ulted, and it just was a little bit odd, so they fixed / buffed it. Nice. And yeah, that's it. Like I said, a pretty big update. We've got some really big things in there, some smaller things that make a really big difference, a bunch that I agree with, a bunch that I don't. Would love to hear your thoughts on all of them, of course, down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Of course, let me know what you want to see me do next as well. I'll see you guys all really, really soon. And as always, stay frosty. My voice is completely shredded. This is like a post-credit scene. I've been recording here for like an hour. I thought this was going to be like a 5-10 minute video. I don't know how. I had so much to say about these changes, man.